Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. Now, after a long wait, Ukraine's election debate has indeed intensified. President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's ready to hold national polls within 60 to 90 days, provided the United States of America and his European allies guarantee security amid the ongoing war. Mahashweta Lala with this report.
As pressure builds to end the Russia-Ukraine war after multiple meetings between major stakeholders, including the US, Russia, Ukraine and European countries, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's ready to conduct elections in the next 60 to 90 days.
For us, thank you so much.
But Zelensky has one condition. He has urged President Trump and the European allies to provide security guarantees to conduct elections.
And since this question is raised by President of the United States, our partners, I will answer very briefly. I'm ready for the elections. Moreover, I ask now, and I declare it openly, the United States of America to help me, including together with European colleagues, ensure security for the elections. And then, the next 60 to 90 days, Ukraine will be ready to hold the elections. And I personally have the will and readiness for this.
Zelensky put forth the difficulties in conducting the election amid war raging on.
To hold the elections, there are two questions. First of all, security. How to do it under the strikes, under the missiles, and in the relation to our troops. The question is how to vote. You know it. I don't want to repeat. And the second question is legislative basis for the legitimacy of the elections.
The Ukrainian president's election comment followed Donald Trump's interview to Politico that Zelensky was using war as an excuse not to hold elections.
To hold an election, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. It hasn't been doing particularly well. Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's an important time to hold an election. You know, they're using war not to hold an election.
Trump also slammed that there are only talks about democracy while it does not really exist.
This is a political. They talk about a democracy, but it gets to a point where it's not a democracy anymore.
Earlier, Zelensky met NATO chief and EU's Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa in Brussels. He also met Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. After discussing the US-backed peace plan with NSAs of Europe and NATO, Zelensky believes that a refined proposal will be submitted to the US. Meanwhile, Russia said its armed forces had taken control over one more settlement in the Dnipropetrovsk region, while Ukraine reported repelling attacks from the Russian side. Russian forces said that they carried out strikes on Ukrainian military-industrial facilities, energy and transportation infrastructure supporting the Ukrainian military, and long-range drone launch sites. Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
Will there be elections in Ukraine or not? To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by Ambassador William Taylor, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. He's joining me from Washington, D.C. Ambassador Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we are looking at Zelensky announcing elections with guarantees from U.S. and EU, but all this comes after a lot of pressure from Trump. Is this an election that we're looking at under duress?
Well, Geeta, there will not be an election in Ukraine unless there is a ceasefire, unless the Russians stop attacking Ukraine. And President Zelensky made that clear. You can't have an election. You cannot have an election while the Russians are bombarding cities. And if people are lining up to vote at polling stations, they are vulnerable to be attacked by the Russians. So there will not be an election in Ukraine until the Russians stop their aggression, stop the bombardment, enter into a ceasefire with the Ukrainians.
President Trump says war is an excuse for Zelensky to continue staying in power. how would you react to the statement by the American president, and is that the case really here?
No, it is not the case. It is not the case. President Zelensky has made it clear before, and he's made it clear again today, that he's ready to go to elections. He can't go to elections while the Russians are attacking him. Legally, he can't go to elections while there is martial law, which is in place during the Russian aggression. So President Zelensky is very clear. He's ready to go for elections. He has been and is and will be, but it cannot be an election. He cannot conduct an election until the Russians stop the ceasefire. So Zelensky is not using this as an excuse.
Well, Ambassador Taylor, we recently spoke with President Putin himself, and when asked about the negotiations and the end game, he actually for the first time spoke about negotiations, and that if there needs to be a resolution, it has to come through the negotiating table. What are the red lines over here? Do you envisage a final draft where there could very well be a resolution to the entire conflict that we're seeing between the two countries?
If President Putin is willing to stop the war, stop attacking Ukraine, recognize Ukraine as a sovereign nation, freeze the front line along the current lines, yes, I think it's possible. But I have to tell you, Gita, there is no indication that I've seen that President Putin is ready to end this war in negotiations.
Well, but then again, you know, we're seeing a lot of flip-flop from the American side, Trump administration. How do you think the European Union is going to carry forward and support Ukraine should US walk out of the entire support structure? Because that's the security guarantee that President Zelensky is really asking for. And in a recent Doha summit or conversation forum, Donald Trump Jr. made it very clear that almost saying that they're siding with Russia because the conversations with Russia have moved forward, but none with Ukraine.
Actually, that's not true, Gita. It's just not true. The Ukrainians and the Americans have come to an agreement several times on ceasefires. And when they took that agreement, those agreements, to the Russians said no. Putin has said no. So there's been plenty of relations and agreements between the Americans and the Ukrainians. The Russians have turned it down. President Trump is not going to walk away from Ukraine. President Trump has a lot invested. He has been at this, to his credit. He's been working on this since before the election, before his election. He's not going to walk away. He wants to end this war. That's what needs to happen. The way this war ends is Putin stops fighting.
Right.
Putin started this war, and Putin can end this war. And President Trump has the leverage to force Putin to stop this war.
Okay, a very significant statement coming from you, Ambassador Taylor. You're saying President Trump is not going to walk out of this one. He's not walking back. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, amid row over changes in H-1B visa and immigration policies, the U.S. State Department has confirmed 85,000 visas have been revoked since January. In a post on X, the State Department said 85,000 visa revocations since January. President Trump and Secretary Rubio adhere to one simple mandate, and they won't stop anytime soon. It also posted a picture of Trump with text, "Make America Safe Again." According to a department official, 8,000 of the revoked visas belong to students, and key reasons for revocation were driving under influence, theft, and assault. Earlier, visas of those who were accused of celebrating the killing of activist Charlie Kirk were also revoked. International students who have joined in pro-Palestine protests, too, have come under scrutiny. The administration has also increased vetting of H-1B visa applicants, a key program for U.S. employers seeking specialized foreign talent. Now, it was a major embarrassment for Pakistan when its Interior Minister, Mohsin Naqvi's car was stopped by British officials outside the UK Foreign Office in London for a thorough search. Though it's unclear whether it was a routine check or prompted by specific reasons, The video of the search of his vehicle has gone viral. Naqvi was in the UK to hold discussions, reportedly including talks on the extradition of individuals such as Shahzad Akbar and Adil Raja, people we've spoken with who sit in London but also question the establishment in Pakistan. The video was first shared by Pakistani journalist Saeed Yousafzai. Though there are no official confirmation, reports suggest that the authorities were searching the Pakistani minister's car for materials which included explosives and narcotics. India's economy is booming, but the rupee has just crashed past 90 per dollar for the first time, triggering shock waves across markets and households. Rising imports and foreign outflows are piling under pressure on the currency. So is this a temporary slide or India's new normal? Shaurik Saha reports.
This week, the rupee delivered a shock of its own, crashing past 90 per dollar for the first time ever. So how can a booming economy and a falling currency coexist? Experts say it's simple. GDP tells you what's happening inside India. The rupee tells you what's happening to India in the world outside. Right now, global forces are hitting the rupee from all sides. A strong US dollar, high American interest rates, geopolitical tensions, and rising global commodity prices. They're all pulling the rupee down. At the same time, India's own growth, it's creating its own pressure. A fast-growing economy needs more oil, more electronics, more metals, which means more dollars going out. And in the delayed India-US trade deal, record high prices for crude, metals and gold, and nearly 18 billion in foreign investor outflows, and the slide was almost inevitable. But what about the RBI? It's holding its fire. The central bank is letting the rupee find its level, instead of defending any specific number, stepping in only to curb wild swings, not to hold a line. So what does all this mean for people watching at home? Travel, education and imported goods will get a little more expensive. Business dependent on foreign inputs will feel the pinch. But exporters, IT firms, families receiving remittances actually benefit when the rupee weakens. The bottom line, a strong economy doesn't always mean a strong currency. And right now, India's domestic engine is roaring, even as global headwinds keep the rupee under pressure. The question is, will the rupee bounce back or is 90 the new normal? With Shaurik Saha, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Nepal's Pokhara International Airport has exploded into a corruption scandal with Chinese contractors CAMCE accused of doubling costs, leaving work incomplete and creating technical failures. What was billed as modern progress is now a financial and operational burden. How did it unravel? Jyoti Shukla with this report.
Nepal's shiny new Pokhara International Airport was meant to be a symbol of modern aviation. Instead, it has turned into the center of one of the country's biggest corruption scandals, and this time the finger is pointed straight at Beijing's construction arm. Nepal's anti-graft agency, the CIAA, has charged 55 individuals, including China CAMC Engineering, a state-linked giant, over what investigators call inflated costs, false billing, and deliberate manipulation. The numbers are staggering. Pokhara Airport was cleared at $145 million, but the cost ballooned to $286.5 million, almost double. Investigators say that didn't happen by accident. According to the Commission for the Investigation of Abuse of Authority, China CAMC acted with bad intentions, pushed up costs without justification, and pressured Nepali officials to approve inflated figures to secure illegal benefits. Letters were allegedly sent to bureaucrats asking them to raise the project price even before the tender process moved ahead. And the problems didn't end with the accounting. A parliamentary sub-panel found that millions were paid for work simply never done. $5.5 million for suitable soil. Delivered? No. $4.4 million to level and press the runway. Completed? Also no. Drainage work costing $10.6 million? Again, nothing on the ground. Even AC installation turned into a billing mess, with Nepal forced to pay an extra $742,000. Add to that a tax exemption worth 2.2 billion rupees granted to the Chinese firm, despite a contract that explicitly required them to pay taxes. And the airport itself, operational, yes, but flawed. A high-level aviation report says design limitations now restrict aircraft load capacity, impact takeoffs, and keep most international airlines away. Only one foreign flight currently operates, a weekly Pokhara-Lhasa route, notably via a Nepal-China joint venture. So now, what was once showcased as China-backed development cooperation has turned into a legal and diplomatic headache. Nepal's investigators want accountability. Beijing state contractor stands accused. And the Pokhara airport, meant to make Nepal soar, is struggling to get off the ground. With Jyoti Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
And let's take a look at some other stories we couldn't touch upon in detail in World at a Glance.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado was awarded this year's Nobel Peace Prize in absentia. Her daughter, Ana Corina Sosa Machado, accepted the prestigious Nobel medal and accompanying certificate at the award ceremony in Oslo City Hall. The Norwegian Nobel Committee announced in October that it had selected Machado as the recipient of the 2025 Peace Prize because of her commitment to the democratic rights of the Venezuelan people, to whom she dedicated her award. Machado, who lives in hiding, is a staunch opponent of Venezuelan's authoritarian president, Nicolas Maduro. As tensions rise between Beijing and Tokyo, Russian and Chinese air forces conducted joint patrols over the East China Sea and the western part of the Pacific Ocean. Two Russian Tu-95 nuclear-capable strategic bombers flew from the Sea of Japan towards the East China Sea to rendezvous with two Chinese H-6 bombers. Chinese fighter jets made round-trip flight between Japan's Okinawa and Miyako Islands. This is the 10th joint strategic air patrol organized by the two militaries since 2019. Congolese president has accused neighboring Rwanda of violating its commitments just days after attending a ceremony in Washington to sign deals that aimed to end years of conflict in the country's mineral-rich east. The Congolese president has made the accusations in a speech to lawmakers. There was no immediate response from Rwanda. Meanwhile, deadly clashes have marred efforts to begin implementing the terms of US and Qatar brokered agreements signed in recent months between Congo, Rwanda, and the rebel group M23. Australia's world-first social media ban is taking effect, legally barring children younger than 16 from holding accounts with Facebook, Instagram, Kik, Reddit, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, X, YouTube and Twitch. The platforms face fines of up to 49.5 million Australian dollars if they fail to take reasonable steps to remove the accounts. A directions hearing will be held in late February to set a hearing date for the constitutional challenge that will be heard by the full bench of 7 judges. Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram and Threads, was the first tech giant to react, beginning to exclude suspected young children from last week.
That's all on this edition of India Today Global. But before I go, here's a deep dive. The IMF is writing billion-dollar checks. Washington is rolling out the red carpet, and Pakistan is suddenly strategically important again. But beneath the glamour lies the old machine of proxies, leverage, and shadow networks. How long will the world pretend? Watch Statecraft to find out. Goodbye and take care. The IMF is bailing out Pakistan yet again, and the world is supposed to pretend it doesn't know the script by heart. The crisis, the plea, the bailout, the promises, the quiet diversions, and the inevitable return to the same pit of denial. This time, however, the story is wrapped in something more dangerous, something more calculated, something more politically loaded. Because 2025 isn't just another year of Pakistan running out of money. It's the year Islamabad discovered a fresh source of confidence, its new, carefully engineered closeness to the United States of America. Washington is warming up again. The doors of the White House are open to Pakistan's army chief. And right in the middle of this diplomatic choreography comes the IMF, signing off on billions while the entire world knows exactly where Pakistan's free fiscal space tends to flow after every bailout. At what point does this cycle stop pretending to be about economics and start admitting what everyone is thinking? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Delhi's argument is clear. Money is fungible. If the IMF covers Pakistan's fiscal fire, Islamabad's own revenue can quietly slip into the shadows where it has historically maintained state-sponsored assets. India bluntly warned that these bailouts risk enabling exactly the behavior Pakistan claims to be reforming. And when the Pahalgam terror attack unfolded, followed by India's military response, the IMF itself quietly added new conditions, not because of compassion, but because geopolitical heat affects economic risk. Why does the IMF pretend otherwise? Pakistan's entire struggle with the FATF sits like a ghost over this entire 2025 bailout drama. Only in October 2022 did Pakistan finally fight its way off the FATF grey list after years of warnings, humiliations, and pressure. For 4 long years, the FATF found that Pakistan's legal, supervisory, and enforcement systems simply were not preventing terror financing. Charities used as fronts, informal money networks untouched, political reluctance to go after certain groups. And the timing is not subtle. Pakistan's lobbying machine in Washington has been aggressively reactivated, hiring firms close to the Trump administration, organizing high-level visits, pushing conferences, and executing a deliberate charm offensive fronted by its military leadership. None of this is accidental, and none of this is divorced from the IMF's willingness to keep Pakistan afloat. Can anyone still pretend the IMF is apolitical? While IMF money cannot be used for defense or terror financing, of course, explicitly prohibited in the program, the logic of fungibility remains the central concern. When IMF money fills the external financing gaps, Pakistan's domestic resources become unshackled. And that is exactly what India warns the world about. If Pakistan wants to keep feeding certain networks, certain proxies, certain operations, all it needs is fresh oxygen for its budget lines. The IMF doesn't fund terrorism directly, but it indirectly enables a state with a long record of tolerating terror financing structures. India's abstentions weren't diplomatic theater. They were a direct shot at the heart of Pakistan's credibility. IMF can deny it. Pakistan can spin it. The US can overlook it. But India will continue reminding the world that money is fungible, terror networks thrive on shadows, and Pakistan's history carries weight.